The Colorado River is the single most important source of water in the American Southwest, a river that gathers the melting snows of the Rocky Mountains and carries them across deserts and canyons to sustain tens of millions of people, millions of acres of farmland, and great cities that could never have risen in the desert without it. But the Colorado is failing. Diminished by a relentless drought and a warming climate, its flow has declined, and its great reservoirs have fallen toward levels that would cripple their ability to function, and the once unthinkable prospect of the river failing to meet the demands placed upon it has become a real and pressing danger. If the Colorado fails, the water would not simply vanish all at once for everyone equally. Instead, because of the harsh rules that govern how the river's water is shared, some cities would lose their water before others, cut off first as the failing river is rationed according to a strict order of priority. This is the story of what would happen if the Colorado River failed, and of the 10 cities that would lose their water first. Before we go further, one honest word about what this really means, because the scenario is stark and deserves care. To speak of the Colorado River failing is to describe an extreme situation, not a certainty and not an event that would happen overnight. The river is unlikely to vanish completely, but it could fall so low that it can no longer meet the enormous demands placed upon it, so that its great reservoirs reach the point where they can no longer reliably deliver water, and the users who depend on it face severe cuts. And crucially, those cuts would not fall on everyone at the same time or to the same degree, for the water is governed by a system of priority that determines in a strict order who loses water first and who is protected longest. Understanding that order, and which cities stand at the front of the line to lose their water, reveals the harsh arithmetic beneath the Southwest's water, and that understanding is what this video is here to provide. It is also worth saying plainly that ranking the cities in this way is not meant to alarm the people who live in them, but to illuminate how the system works. For the more clearly the danger is understood, the better the region can act to prevent it. The order of losing is a tool for understanding, a way of seeing the hidden structure of risk that runs beneath the calm surface of daily life in the Southwest, and it is offered here in that spirit, as knowledge rather than as prophecy. Real quick before we go further, a lot of people watch these all the way to the end, genuinely enjoy them, and forget the one small thing that keeps a small channel like ours alive: hitting subscribe. It is honestly important right now. Our sub rate is low, and every single tap makes a real difference. So if you are finding this valuable, please subscribe right now. It takes 1 second and costs you nothing. And drop the name of your city in the comments so we can see who is watching. Alright, let's begin. The rule that decides who loses first. To understand which cities would lose their water first if the Colorado failed, we must first understand the rule that decides the order, for it is not need or population or fairness that determines who is cut first, but a legal principle that has governed the water of the West for well over a century. That principle is the rule of priority, often expressed in the old phrase, first in time, first in right. It means that the right to use the water is ranked by seniority, by who first put the water to use, so that the oldest claims are the strongest and the newest are the weakest. In times of plenty, this ranking hardly matters, for there is enough water for everyone. But in times of shortage, and above all if the river were to fail, the ranking becomes everything, for the water is delivered in order of seniority, and those with the most junior rights are cut first and cut deepest, while those with the most senior rights are protected. This principle is harsh and indifferent, for it does not ask whether a use is wise or necessary, or whether many people depend upon it. It asks only who was first. A city that began drawing water recently holds a weaker claim than a farm that began drawing it long ago, regardless of how many people the city holds. Layered on top of this, between the states that share the river, are agreements that give some states a stronger position than others, and that oblige the upper states, near the river source, to deliver a certain amount of water to the lower states downstream. Together, this priority system and these agreements form the harsh machinery that would determine, if the river failed, who loses water first. It is by understanding this machinery that we can identify the 10 cities most exposed, for their place in the order of losing is written into the seniority of their claims and the position they hold in the sharing of the river. It is worth understanding how this system came to be, for it explains why it is so difficult to change. The rules that govern the Colorado were established over the course of the last century, beginning with a great agreement that divided the river between an upper group of states and a lower group, and continuing through a long series of laws, court decisions, and contracts that assigned specific quantities and priorities to each user. This vast body of rules, sometimes called the law of the river, was built up over generations, and countless investments, cities, and livelihoods now depend upon it. To change it, to set aside the priority system in favor of some other way of sharing the water, would require overturning agreements that have governed the region for 100 years and that are woven into the legal and economic fabric of 7 states and 2 nations. This is why, even though many find the outcomes of the priority system troubling, it remains the framework within which the crisis unfolds, and why the order of losing is so difficult to alter. The system was designed to bring certainty to the sharing of a scarce and vital resource, and that certainty, harsh as it is what the entire region has built upon. Let us now count them down, beginning with those that would lose their water first. The first to lose, Tucson. We begin with Tucson, the desert city of southern Arizona, which holds one of the most junior positions in the entire system and would therefore be among the very first to lose its Colorado River water if the river failed. Much of Tucson's Colorado water is delivered through a great canal that carries the river's water hundreds of miles across the state. And when the funding for that canal was secured long ago, Arizona accepted that this water would hold a junior priority, cut before the water of some of its neighbors in times of shortage. Within Arizona, the water delivered through the canal is itself ranked, and Tucson's share sits near the bottom of that ranking, placing it at the very front of the line to lose its water. Yet Tucson's story is not one of helplessness, for the city has been remarkably foresighted about its exposed position. For many years, rather than using all of its canal water directly, the city has taken much of it and stored it underground, recharging the aquifer beneath the city and banking a substantial reserve against the day when its deliveries are cut. This banked water, combined with the city's strong conservation and its careful management, gives it a cushion that its junior position would not otherwise suggest, a store of water that could help carry it through even a severe reduction in its Colorado supply. If the river failed and Tucson's canal water was cut first, this banked reserve would be its lifeline, allowing it to endure the loss far better than most cities could. There is a valuable lesson in the contrast between Tucson's junior legal standing and its actual resilience, for it shows that a place disadvantaged by the harsh rules of the river can still protect itself through foresight and preparation. The banked water beneath the city, the fruit of years of careful storage, is a form of security that does not appear anywhere in the ledger of legal priority, yet it may prove as valuable in a crisis as any senior right. Tucson understood that its junior standing made it vulnerable, and rather than simply accepting that vulnerability or hoping the crisis would never come, it took concrete action to prepare, storing away water in the good years against the bad ones to come. This is a hopeful thought amid a grim scenario, for it suggests that the order of losing is not the whole story, and that a city's fate depends not only on the accident of when it first claimed its water, but also on the wisdom and the discipline it brings to preparing for the lean times. Tucson thus illustrates both the peril of holding the most junior claim to a failing river and the wisdom of preparing for the worst in advance. And though it would be first to lose its river water, it has given itself a better chance than most of surviving the loss. The second to lose. Phoenix, the second city in the order of losing, is Phoenix, the vast metropolis of the Arizona desert, one of the largest and fastest growing cities in the nation, which draws a large share of its water from the Colorado through the same great canal that supplies Tucson, and which holds a junior priority that places it near the front of the line to lose its water. Phoenix has grown into a sprawling giant in a place of extreme heat and almost no rain. Its millions of residents dependent on water brought from afar, and its junior standing means that when the river fails, its canal water is among the first to be cut, after Tucson, but ahead of the senior users downstream. If the Colorado failed, the water carried to Phoenix through the canal would be cut early and deeply, and the city would face a crisis of enormous proportions, for its vast population and its intense heat make its need for water immense. Phoenix has prepared with unusual care, banking water underground in the wetter years and investing heavily in conservation. and it draws on other sources as well, from rivers within the state and from groundwater beneath the valley. But those other sources are themselves under strain and could not begin to replace the vast quantity of water the city draws from the Colorado. The junior standing of Phoenix's river water is a legacy of a bargain made long ago, when Arizona accepted a lower priority in exchange for the federal funding to build the Great Canal that carries the water across the desert. At the time, in an era of apparent abundance, the bargain seemed reasonable, for a serious shortage seemed a distant and unlikely prospect. But the river has fallen far faster than anyone then imagined, and that long ago bargain now weighs heavily, determining that in the worst times, Phoenix's canal water is among the first to go. The scale of what is at stake is enormous, for the metropolitan area around Phoenix has grown into one of the largest population centers in the country, home to millions of people who have made their lives in the desert on the strength of this imported water, and the city continues to grow even now. As one of the earliest to lose its river water, Phoenix, a giant built on the assumption of abundant imported water, would confront the terrible reality of a supply that had failed, and even its careful preparation could only soften, not prevent, the blow. Quick question I would genuinely love your take on, and it takes 10 seconds. Did you know that if the river ran short, a century-old rule would decide which cities lose water first, no matter how many people live there? Drop a yes or a no in the comments, because your answers help me understand what surprises people most, and I read every single reply. Okay, back to the cities. The third to lose, Mesa, the third city in the order of losing, is Mesa, one of the largest cities of the Arizona desert, part of the great metropolitan area around Phoenix, which draws a significant share of its water from the Colorado through the same Great Canal, and shares in the junior priority that places the Arizona cities near the front of the line. As one of the most populous cities in the state, Mesa has grown into a giant in its own right, home to a large and expanding population, and its dependence on the junior canal water ties its fate closely to the failing of the river. If the Colorado failed, Mesa, like Phoenix and Tucson, would lose much of its canal water early, its junior standing leaving it acutely exposed. Mesa draws on other sources as well, including rivers within the state and groundwater, which give it some measure of flexibility, and it benefits from the careful planning that the region has undertaken to prepare for a drier future. Storing water underground and investing in conservation, much as its larger neighbor has done. But these measures, valuable as they are, could not fully replace the vast quantity of water the city draws from the Colorado, and a city growing as fast as Mesa faces the added difficulty of serving an ever larger population from a supply that would be shrinking. But its large and growing population, its desert setting, and its heavy reliance on the junior canal water place it among the first cities to lose its supply, for a city of its size cannot easily reduce its need for water, and the loss of a significant portion of its supply from the failing river would be a serious blow. The inclusion of Mesa alongside Phoenix and Tucson highlights an important truth about the region, that the metropolitan area of central Arizona is not a single city, but a vast constellation of large cities, each substantial in its own right, all drawing on the same junior canal water and all exposed together to the failing of the river. Mesa alone is home to a population that would make it a major city anywhere in the country, and it sits alongside several other large cities in the same sprawling area, so that the total population dependent on the junior canal water is enormous. This means that the loss of the canal water would strike not one city, but a whole metropolitan region of millions all at once, magnifying the human scale of the crisis and making the junior standing of the Arizona cities a matter of the gravest consequence. Mesa, a growing giant on the same canal that feeds Phoenix and Tucson, stands among the first to lose water if the Colorado fails, its fate bound up with the junior standing it shares with its neighbors. The fourth to lose, Las Vegas, the fourth city in the order of losing, is Las Vegas, the dazzling desert metropolis that draws almost all of its water from the Colorado, and whose junior standing and near total dependence on a single source place it among the first to lose its water if the river fails. Las Vegas rose improbably in one of the driest places in the country, and it leans almost entirely on the great reservoir on the Colorado for its supply, so that the failing of the river would strike directly at the heart of the city's water. Nevada's share of the river is the smallest of the states, and it is a junior share, so that Las Vegas is among the first to face cuts as the river declines. Las Vegas has done more than almost any other city to prepare for this danger, becoming a world leader in water conservation, tearing out thirsty grass, and recycling nearly all the water used indoors, so that it has reduced its total water use even as its population has grown. It even built a deep intake reaching near the bottom of the reservoir, ensuring it could keep drawing water even if the reservoir fell very low. But no amount of conservation can create water that is not there. And if the Colorado failed, Las Vegas, so utterly dependent on the one river, would face a crisis of the first order. Its remarkable efficiency able only to soften the blow, not prevent it. There is a cruel irony in the position of Las Vegas, for it is at once one of the most vulnerable of the major cities and one of the best prepared. Its vulnerability comes from its near total dependence on a single source and its junior standing, which together place it among the first to lose its water. But its preparation, the world-leading conservation, the recycling, and the deep intake, has given it a resilience that few cities can match, so that it would endure the loss far better than its raw exposure would suggest. This combination of deep vulnerability and remarkable preparation makes Las Vegas a kind of case study in how a city can confront a grave water threat, neither denying the danger nor being paralyzed by it, but acting with determination to protect itself as far as possible. Las Vegas, junior in its claim and near total in its dependence, stands among the first cities to lose water if the Colorado fails, and yet it has done more than almost any other to prepare for that very day. The fifth to lose. Henderson, the fifth city in the order of losing, is Henderson. The large city that lies just beside Las Vegas in the same desert valley, sharing the same near total dependence on the Colorado for its water and the same junior standing that places the Nevada cities among the first to lose. As one of the largest cities in Nevada and part of the great metropolitan area that has grown up in the valley, Henderson draws its water from the same source as its famous neighbor, from the great reservoir on the Colorado, so that it faces the same early loss if the river fails. Henderson has grown rapidly along with the rest of the valley, its population swelling as people have been drawn to the region, and this growth has added to the demand on a water supply that would be among the first to be cut. Like Las Vegas, Henderson benefits from the aggressive conservation and the careful management that have made the valley a leader in stretching its water, and it shares in the protection offered by the deep intake and the recycling of the water used indoors. But it also shares in the fundamental vulnerability. For the entire valley, Henderson included, depends overwhelmingly on the Colorado, and the failing of the river would threaten the whole community early. The situation of Henderson illustrates an important point about the crisis, that entire metropolitan areas, not just individual cities, can rise or fall together on the fate of a single source. The Great Valley in which Las Vegas and Henderson lie is home to millions of people spread across several cities and communities, and nearly all of them depend on the Colorado, so that the failing of the river is not a threat to one city alone, but to a whole region and its interconnected economy. This concentration of dependence is both a vulnerability and, in a sense, a spur to unified action, for the shared reliance on the river gives all the communities of the valley a common interest in protecting the water and in conserving it, and it has helped drive the aggressive conservation that has made the valley a leader in stretching its supply. Henderson, sharing the same junior standing and the same near-total dependence as Las Vegas, stands among the first cities to lose water if the Colorado fails. Quick pause, because this part matters and it deserves to be seen by more people. If you are getting real value from this, tap the like button. It genuinely helps the video reach others who care about where their water comes from. And if you have family or friends anywhere in the Southwest, share this with them, because it honestly matters that the people who depend on this water understand what is happening to it. One like, one share to someone in your family, and let's keep going. The sixth to lose, Albuquerque, the sixth city in the order of losing, is Albuquerque, the largest city of New Mexico, which draws a portion of its water from the Colorado system through a diversion that carries water across the mountains from a tributary of the Great River into the basin where the city lies. This diverted water holds a junior standing, and because it comes from the Colorado system, the city would lose it if the river failed and the delivery obligations of the region were strictly enforced, placing Albuquerque among the cities that would lose their Colorado water relatively early. Albuquerque's history offers a cautionary tale, for it once believed it sat atop an inexhaustible supply of groundwater and pumped freely from the aquifer beneath it, only to discover that the underground water was being drawn down toward exhaustion. The city wisely changed its ways, working to reduce its reliance on the aquifer and to lean more heavily on the surface water diverted from the Colorado system. But this surface water, drawn from a tributary of the Great River, is subject to the same drought and warming that threaten the Colorado, so that in the failing of the river, this diverted water could be curtailed, throwing the city back upon its recovering aquifer. The city's turn from groundwater toward the diverted surface water was, in its time, a wise and responsible step, a recognition that the aquifer could not be pumped forever and that a more sustainable path required leaning on the renewable flow of the rivers. But the failing of the Colorado reveals the limits of even that wisdom. For the surface water the city now depends upon is drawn from the same stressed system that would be collapsing, so that the very source it turned to for sustainability could itself be curtailed. This places the city in a difficult bind, caught between an aquifer it must not overdraw and a surface supply that could fail, with few easy options between them. And it illustrates how the reach of the Colorado extends even across mountain ranges into basins that most people would never associate with the great river of the desert. If the Colorado failed, Albuquerque would lose its diverted surface water, its groundwater becoming its main fallback, a reminder that the reach of the failing river extends even across the mountains into basins far from its main channel, and that cities in those basins are among those that would lose their Colorado water. The seventh to lose, Los Angeles, the seventh city in the order of losing, is Los Angeles, the vast metropolis of Southern California, which draws a significant share of its water from the Colorado through a long aqueduct, but which holds a relatively senior priority that would protect it longer than the junior cities of Arizona and Nevada. Los Angeles reaches out across enormous distances to bring in the water it needs, from the mountains to the east, from the north of the state, and from the Colorado, and its senior standing in the sharing of the river means that its Colorado water would be cut later than that of the junior users, though not spared entirely if the river truly failed. Because Los Angeles holds senior rights, it sits further back in the order of losing, protected while the junior cities lose their water first. But a true failure of the Colorado would be a crisis so severe that even the senior users could not fully escape it, and the loss of the city's Colorado water would strain a metropolis whose demands are enormous and whose other sources are themselves under pressure from drought and the shrinking snowpack. The city has invested heavily in conservation, recycling, and the capture of stormwater, and it is working to reduce its reliance on the distant river so that it is better prepared than it once was. There is a certain irony in the position of Los Angeles, for the city lies beside the vast Pacific Ocean, with more water in view than almost any inland city could imagine, and yet that water is salt and undrinkable without costly treatment. So that the city must reach hundreds of miles inland to the Colorado for a portion of the fresh water it needs. This dependence on distant sources has always been the city's fundamental vulnerability, the price of building a metropolis of millions in a place with little water of its own, and the failing of the Colorado would expose that vulnerability, even as the city's seniority protected it longer than the junior cities. The senior standing of Los Angeles and the other California users is itself a legacy of history, for California put much of its Colorado water to use early and secured a strong position in the sharing of the river, a position that now shields it while the junior cities of Arizona and Nevada face the first cuts. Los Angeles, senior in its claim but enormous in its needs, would lose its Colorado water only after the junior cities had lost theirs, but it would still feel the failing of the river deeply, a reminder that even the most senior users are not immune to the collapse of the river on which they all depend. All right, I know, this is the second time I am bringing this up. You can roll your eyes at me, but honestly, if you have made it this deep into a video about the Colorado River, you clearly care about this stuff and a lot of you watching still have not subscribed. I am not going to make you feel bad about it, but that one tap genuinely tips the scales for a small channel fighting a low sub rate. It really does matter to us. That is the last time I will ask. Promise. Let's finish. The eighth to lose. San Diego, the eighth city in the order of losing, is San Diego, the great coastal city of Southern California that has depended heavily on imported water, including a large share from the Colorado, but which, like Los Angeles, holds a relatively senior standing in the sharing of the river that would protect its Colorado water longer than the junior cities. San Diego sits in a dry region with little local water, and it has long relied on water brought from afar, so that the health of the Colorado matters greatly to its security, even as its seniority places it further back in the order of losing. San Diego learned the danger of its dependence during an earlier drought, when its imported water was threatened, an experience that spurred it to invest heavily in securing and diversifying its supply. It turned to the ocean, building the capacity to remove salt from seawater, and it secured more reliable arrangements for the water it imports, so that it is better prepared today than it once was. This foresight would serve it well in the failing of the river, giving it more resilience than many other cities, for its ability to draw water from the sea would keep flowing even as the Colorado failed. But San Diego still depends heavily on imported water, and a significant portion comes from the Colorado, so that even with its seniority protecting it longer. The failing of the river would force it to lean ever harder on its other sources and its desalination. San Diego's turn to the sea is especially significant, for it represents a fundamentally new kind of water source, one that does not depend on the rain, the snow, or the level of a distant reservoir, but on the ocean itself, which is effectively limitless. The removal of salt from seawater is expensive and demands a great deal of energy, and it cannot by itself supply all of a great city's needs, but it offers a drought-proof source that provides a genuine hedge against the failure of the imported water on which the city once leaned so heavily. In the failing of the Colorado, this ability to draw water from the sea would be one of San Diego's greatest assets, a source that would keep flowing even as the river failed, and it stands as a model for how other coastal cities might reduce their vulnerability to the loss of imported water. San Diego, senior in its claim but heavily dependent on imported water, would lose its Colorado water later than the junior cities, but it would still be counted among the cities that lose water when the river fails. The ninth to lose, Denver, the ninth city, in the order of losing, is Denver, the largest city of the Rocky Mountain region, which draws a significant share of its water from the headwaters of the Colorado, carried across the mountains through a system of diversions, and whose loss would come in a different form from that of the cities downstream. Denver sits in the upper region of the river, where the water begins, and one might think a headwaters city would be safe from the river's failure. But the upper states labor under the obligation to deliver water downstream, and if the river failed and could not meet both their own use and that obligation, the upper states could be forced to curtail their own water, a curtailment that would fall on their junior users, of which Denver's diversions are a part. If the Colorado failed, Denver could thus lose a portion of its water, not because the water was absent from its mountains, but because the obligation to deliver water downstream forced a curtailment of its junior diversions. This is a subtle and often misunderstood danger, for it means that even a city at the source of the river is not immune to its failure, and that the harsh rules of the river can reach back upstream to threaten the very region where the water originates. The same drought and warming that would fail the river would also shrink the snowpack that feeds Denver's diversions directly, adding to the pressure. The threat of a downstream delivery obligation forcing curtailment upstream is one of the most consequential and least understood features of the entire system, for it upends the intuition that the states nearest the source of the water are the safest. In an ordinary drought, the headwaters region might seem secure, but the agreements that govern the river bind the upper states to send a set amount of water downstream, regardless of how little the river carries. And if the flow is not enough to meet both their own needs and that obligation, it is their own newer water users who must give way. This means that Denver, drawing junior water from the headwaters, could lose a portion of its supply even as water still flowed in its mountains, sacrificed to satisfy the obligation to the states below. It is a sobering illustration of how deeply the fate of the entire river is shared, and of how the failure of the Colorado would spare no part of the vast region that depends on it. Denver, drawing from the headwaters yet bound by the obligation to deliver water downstream, stands among the cities that would lose water if the Colorado fails, its loss a reminder that the river's failure would reach from its mouth all the way back to its source. The 10th to lose, Yuma, the 10th and final city in the order of losing, is Yuma, the desert city near where the Colorado approaches the end of its journey, in a region of intense heat and almost no rain that has become one of the most productive agricultural areas in the country precisely because of the river's water. Yuma sits far downstream, near the river's end, and it and the vast farms around it hold some of the most senior rights on the entire river. A legacy of having put the water to use very early, so that in the order of losing, Yuma's water would be among the last to be cut, protected by the seniority of its claims. Yet even the most senior rights cannot deliver water that the river no longer carries, and a true failure of the Colorado would test the value of any claim, however old. If the river failed so completely that even the senior users were cut, Yuma would lose the water on which its city and its agriculture depend almost entirely, and the consequences would be severe. For the region has little to fall back upon, and its farms feed a large share of the nation during the winter months. Yuma's place at the end of the order of losing, protected by its seniority, does not make it safe, but only later to fall, and its inclusion is a reminder that in a true failure of the river, even the most senior and protected users would eventually lose their water. There is a special significance to Yuma's place at the end of the order of losing, for the agriculture around the city is not a minor matter, but a pillar of the nation's food supply, growing a remarkable share of the fresh vegetables that fill the country's markets during the winter months, when little else can be grown anywhere in the nation. The lettuce, the leafy greens, and the other crops that come from the fields around Yuma travel to tables thousands of miles away, so that the failing of the river, by threatening the water that sustains this agriculture, would reach far beyond the region and into the food supply of the whole country. This is a dimension of the crisis that is easy to overlook. For the connection between a failing river and the desert and the vegetables on a distant dinner table is not obvious, and yet it is real and direct, a reminder that the failure of the Colorado would be a national concern and not merely a regional one. That Yuma sits at the end of the order of losing, protected by its seniority, does not make its loss any less consequential. For when even the senior users are cut, the effects would ripple across the entire country. Yuma, senior in its claims but near total in its dependence, would be among the last to lose its water, but lose it would if the Colorado truly failed, its seniority buying time but not ultimate safety. What the order of losing is telling us, having counted down the 10 cities that would lose their water first if the Colorado failed, from junior Tucson at the front of the line to senior Yuma at the end, we can step back and consider what this order of losing is really telling us. The first lesson is that the water of the Colorado is governed by a harsh system of priority that ranks claims by their age, so that when the river fails, some cities lose their water before others, regardless of need or population, and that this ranking, more than any other factor, would determine who suffers first as the river declines. The junior cities of Arizona and Nevada would lose their water first. The senior cities of California and the users near the river's end would lose theirs last, and the cities of the upper region would lose theirs through the obligation to deliver water downstream, so that the order of losing spans the entire vast reach of the river. The second lesson is that this order, though it brings a kind of certainty, produces outcomes that many find troubling, for it does not weigh the needs of the millions who depend on the junior water against the needs of those with senior claims, but simply applies the ranking of seniority. A great city holding junior rights would lose its water before a farming region holding senior ones, regardless of how many people depend on it, and this can seem perverse, a system that protects the older claim over the greater need. Yet this is the harsh reality of the priority system, and it is the framework within which the entire crisis of the failing river would unfold. So that understanding the order of losing is essential to understanding the true shape of the danger. The third and final lesson, however, is one of hope as much as warning, for the failure of the Colorado is not inevitable, and the cities in the order of losing are not passive victims awaiting their fate. many of them have already taken remarkable steps to prepare, banking water underground, conserving fiercely, turning to the sea, and diversifying their supplies. And their efforts show that even in the face of so grave a threat, much can be done to build resilience and to soften the blow. And the failure of the river can itself be prevented, for it would follow from the imbalance between the water flowing into the river and the water drawn out. An imbalance that can be addressed through the difficult reform of agriculture, the conservation of water in the cities, the development of new sources, and above all the cooperative management of the river so as to keep it from failing. There is reason for cautious hope in the history of the river itself, for the states that share the Colorado have time and again managed to reach agreements at the brink, when the alternative of an uncontrolled collapse was too terrible to accept. The negotiations have often been bitter, and the compromise is painful, but the parties have repeatedly found ways to share the shrinking water rather than fight over it to mutual ruin, and this history offers some grounds for believing that they can do so again, even as the crisis deepens. The order of losing describes what would happen if the river failed, but it need not come to pass, for the states and the users of the river still have the power to bring their demand into balance with the river's diminished flow and to keep the great river alive. There is a final thought worth holding on to as we consider the order of losing and the 10 cities it names. The very fact that these cities can be ranked, that we can say with confidence which would lose their water first and which last, reflects the deep interconnection of the entire region, for all of them draw, in one way or another, from the same great river, their fates linked by the vast and largely hidden plumbing of canals, aqueducts, tunnels, and diversions that carry the Colorado's water across the deserts and over the mountains to the many places that depend upon it. This interconnection is the source of both the region's vulnerability and its strongest argument for cooperation, for no single city can save the river alone, and none is truly safe if it fails. The cities at the front of the order of losing and those at the back are bound together by their shared dependence, and their common interest, in the end, lies in keeping the great river alive and flowing so that none of them, first or last, must ever lose their water at all. The Colorado is in danger, and the cities that depend on it, from the first to lose to the last, are watching anxiously. But the story is not yet written, and the same determination that harnessed this great river and built a civilization in the desert can yet be turned to the task of saving it, so that the order of losing remains only a warning of what could be, and not a record of what came to pass. The choice belongs to the people and the leaders of the region, and the time to make it. While the river still flows, and the great reservoirs